notice that each of you have a couple of print
Yeah. Hey, your light's on.
that are new. We wanted to give you guys a kind of timeline of the developments that we're looking at this evening. In this case, the Meadowbrook Fourth being the first one there. Just so kind of you know what stage we're on in the general process. You can see the final plat, for example, is upcoming, and we anticipate that at next month's meeting. I'm open to some feedback here. This is kind of something we're just trying out to add some more context to our cases, and it's really for your utility whenever you're looking into what has happened on each property as we go through it. So let me know what you think, and in the future, I intend to just put these in the agenda packet along with the rest of the documents.
I really like it personally. I
Yeah.
don't know how everyone else feels. Yeah, the timeline, good. Yeah, I really like it.
It's nice to have context.
Yeah,
It's super.
yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. How are build permits this year? I know it's in here, but compared to last year, this time.
A little misleading, let's say that. What doesn't show up as a big number is we just got a 240 unit apartment complex started. But that shows up as 6 buildings,
I see.
not as 240 units.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from staff?
Nothing further now.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move then on to agenda item 5.1, which is a zoning amendment on the Meadowbrook Fourth. Down here to our checklist. I now call item 5.1, which is a public hearing on case number Z-824-0003. We'd like to welcome everyone that's here and lay out everyone interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence so that an informed recommendation can be made by the Planning Commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold another public hearing on the matter, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You'll be asked if there's any new information which was not heard at this hearing. It's to everyone's advantage to present all of the necessary information at this hearing. After the city zoning administrator provides the commission with background information, I'll call upon the applicant. Public comments will be heard following the applicant. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The Planning Commission will close the hearing to public comments and will consider the 14 factors on which to base their recommendation. During this time, the commission may direct questions to the applicant, the public, and/or city staff. You should be aware that the Planning Commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in a district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of the development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask any of the commission members if they intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
None.
No. None.
None? Okay. Official notice for this hearing was published on the City of Andover municipal website on August 24th, 2024, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 49 real property owners of record in the area of notification on August 23rd, 2024. The record shows at least 20 days has elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I'll declare that the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the commission if they have received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this hearing which they'd like to share.
No.
None.
None? Okay. I'll now call upon the city zoning administrator, Les Mangus, to provide us with a report on this case.
I'll be taking that again, Vance.
Okay.
Just for the committee's clarification and to any other potential residents that are interested, we are reopening this case. This is something we've heard previously. We just discovered an error in the notification, so it became necessary to reopen the case. But to go into the background, this would be the Meadowbrook of next phase in the subdivision. As far as the comprehensive plan goes, this fits with our traditional neighborhood place type that we are projecting in our comprehensive plan. This would make the proposed zoning appropriate for the future use. Existing public streets connect the property to Andover's infrastructure as well. Andover sewer and water services can readily be extended to the property. Finally, Evergy serves electric utilities to this property.
Thank you. So if some people were not notified, is that basically what happened?
Correct.
Okay. So this is the same as we saw last time, just,
Yeah, there's no change to the submittal, just
Okay.
reopening because of the error.
Yep. I'll now call upon the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and in response to to the city zoning administrator's report. Applicant here? No. Are there any members of the public that'd like to speak out on this case? No. Any written communication been received?
No.
Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The Planning Commission will not deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation. Sure. That'd be great.
Number one, do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the changes in zoning were approved? Staff, the property is currently served by Evergy. Existing sewage disposal and water utilities can be readily extended to the property. Two, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of deductions made in order to provide needed rights-of-way, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff, the applicant has submitted the preliminary plat to be reviewed concurrently with the zoning amendment. Number three, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, because the surrounding properties are either used for agriculture, not annexed into Andover, or zoned SF2, a screening plan would not be required. However, because the surrounding properties are in Andover's extraterritorial jurisdiction and will later be annexed into the city, any further development at the site plan committee would take this into consideration and ensure adequate screening is in place should those potential uses require a landscape buffer or screening plan. Number four, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff, none. Number five, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff, no error is known to exist. Number six, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? Staff, the subject property is an underdeveloped parcel in the Butler County Agricultural District 40 zoning district. Because it is fewer than 40 acres, it is not suitable for the current zoning.
Concur.
Number seven, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or underdeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, no.
Concur.
Number eight, how reasonably well suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the requested zoning change is well suited for the current zoning of nearby properties.
Concur.
Number nine, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff?
Concur.
Number 10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property in the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the current land uses of the subject property and surrounding neighborhood are low to medium density home sites. The proposed use and zoning would be consistent with the character and condition of the surrounding neighborhood.
Concur.
What would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses in nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff anticipates no detrimental effects from this requested zoning change.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plan policies? The requested zoning change would conform with the city's comprehensive plan 2024 through 2033 by serving as the projected traditional neighborhood place type that is depicted.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in this evaluation? Staff supports the proposed change in zoning.
Concur.
Concur.
And number 14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff does not anticipate any detrimental effects or hardships to public health, safety, or welfare if there is a change to the subject property to the requested use.
Concur. Thank you. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I would remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it's based. And if approval is recommended, the consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or table of discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number Z-A24-0003 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings number 6, 8, 10, and 12 as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting October 29th, 2024. Recording this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the Commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight, which is October 1st, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public streets right of way or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. All right.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we recess the Planning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes. Let's move on to 5.2 then, the variance at 1125 South Andover Road. I'll now call agenda item 5.2, which is public hearing on case number BZA-V24-0003. We would like to welcome everyone interested in this case and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence at this hearing so findings can be made for the decision of this board. In order to grant a variance, 5 specific findings of fact must all be met according to the state statutes and the city zoning regulations. The board is authorized by state statute to make a decision appealable only to district court and not to the governing body. After our zoning administrator provides us with the information on this case, I'll call upon the applicant and then we will hear from other interested parties. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The board will close the hearing to further public comments and then will consider their decision, during which time they may direct questions to the applicant, the public, or staff. You should be aware that the board can require such conditions to be attached to the premises benefited by the variance as may be necessary to comply with the standards set out in Article 11.106. These are to reduce any potential injurious effect of such variance upon other property in the neighborhood and to carry out general purpose and intent of these regulations. Failure to comply with any of these regulations attached to the zoning permit for a variance shall constitute a violation of regulations. You should also be fully aware that if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative in the area have notifications or any conflicts of interest.
None.
None.
Official notice for this hearing was published on the City of Andover municipal website on August 24th, 2023, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 11 real property owners of record in the area of notification on August 23rd, 2023. The record shows at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I'll declare the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the board if any of them have received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this hearing which they'd like to share.
None.
I'll now call upon the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
So whereas typically in this zoning district, 500 square feet are authorized for accessory structures, the applicant's requesting for a 1,200 square foot carport that would ultimately just be used to be sheltering their camper and their boat. While this may sound, far outside of what is permitted, it's important to also consider both the size of the property, which is a little over an acre, as well as how much this would be impacting the maximum lot coverage. This zoning district authorizes well over what this would be impacting. And considering that, staff does not really have any concerns with this application.
And it looks like neighbors have buildings even bigger than they're requesting, right?
Yes, yeah, this carport would match the kind of character and
Sure.
uses around it.
All right. Any questions of staff?
Is there a total number of square feet that accessory structures can maintain on a property?
Yes, in this case, it's up to 500 square feet. There are two existing structures totaling 450 square feet currently. So it would be going over that.
So it's not just a matter of approving the structure, it's also approving the extra square footage.
The variance is for that over square footage of 1,150 square feet.
Okay. Thank you.
So Peter, I think what you were asking is if there is a cumulative maximum.
I was, yeah, thank you.
That is twice the 500 square feet that is allowed. But it has to be less than the principal dwelling. In this case, the cumulative total would be 1,000 feet. That is less than the size of the principal dwelling. But they're asking for an 1,150 square foot carport plus 450 square feet of existing accessory buildings.
Thank you.
I think, didn't we just do one of these in the last few months in the same area? Pretty close,
Right.
pretty routine.
We get this request
lot.
a few times a year, typically in the larger lot subdivisions around the periphery of the city.
Yeah. In the case that I recall, there was several accessory structures, and they needed to remove one or two of them in order to comply, right? For that one. Not this one.
Any other questions of staff? It looked like staff recommended approval, wasn't an issue. Any other questions of staff?
This also gets the RV and the boat out of eyes reach from the property too. I just wanted to add that.
Okay. If the applicant's here, I'll now call upon the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and any response to the zoning administrator's report. No. Seeing none, any members of the public like to speak on the case? Any written communication been received? No applicant here to present any final comments. Hearing no further public comments, I'll hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the board wishes to ask questions or clarify information. The board will now deliberate the request to determine whether the evidence presented supports the conclusion of the required findings of fact. The board will now consider the criteria provided for evaluation.
Mr. Chairperson, I do have a question. Do we know anything, excuse me, anything about the carport? Is it going to have open sides? How tall is it? What kind of materials are going to be built out of? Is it going to have a concrete pad there? Just curious.
The applicant provided us a few details on that. It is a 14-foot sidewall, and they proposed for it to be one of those tubular steel structures with a roof and open sides. And if I remember right, they intended to pour concrete. Yeah, I don't see that in this application, but I recall it from the building permit application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I can do these findings. Findings of fact. Does the evidence demonstrate that? Number one, the physical surrounding shape or topography of the property would result in a practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience for the owner, lessee, or occupant, staff. The characteristics of the property do not result in any practical difficulty to the applicant.
Concur.
Concur. 2, granting the variance will result in material detriment or injury to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. Staff, no detriment and or injury to other property or improvements is anticipated.
Concur.
3, granting the variance will result in an inadequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, substantially increase traffic congestion, increase fire risk, or substantially diminish property values in the neighborhood. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
4, the request for a variance is not based exclusively on a desire of the owner, lessee, occupant, or applicant to make more money out of the property. Staff, the applicant does not have a motivation to make money out of the property through the request of this variance. It's to allow a structure that would protect their camper and boat from inclement weather.
Concur.
Specific conditions to be met. 1, the requested variance arises from a condition unique to the property in question, which is not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, and which is not created by any action of the property owner or the applicant. Staff, the subject property is generally larger than the other comparable single-family housing sites. Comparing it to a smaller lot might comply with the 500 square foot maximum coverage for accessory structures. It would have a comparable impact on the maximum lot coverage as well as what is being requested. Concur. 2, strict application of these provisions of the zoning regulations would result in an unnecessary hardship for the owner, lessee, or occupant of the land or structures. Staff, strict application of the provisions in this case would result in some unnecessary hardship for the owner, given the size of the lot and what is being requested. Concur. Granting the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
The requested variance will not adversely affect public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated. Concur. The requested variance will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of these zoning regulations. Because the requested variance would still allow for the subject property to comply with the maximum lot coverage specified for the zoning district in the bulk regulations. It is not in opposition to the general spirit and intent of the zoning regulations. Concur. Is there a motion to either approve, modify and approve, disapprove, or table the discussion?
I'm happy to make a motion. Having considered the evidence at the hearing and determined the findings of fact to be found to exist that support all 5 conditions set out in subsection 11 6.b2 of the zoning regulations and KSA 12759E. I, Marla Canfield, move the chairperson be authorized to sign a resolution granting the variance for case number BZA V24-003 as requested.
Thank you, Marla. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion. Gary Israel.
Second by Gary. Thank you, Gary. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Would you like a motion to adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals and
Be great.
reconvene the Planning Commission?
That'd be great, Marla.
Well, you have to do your
I make
closing
that motion.
remarks.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No problem. Don't worry about it. A resolution will be prepared and made available to the applicant as soon as reasonably possible, but no later than 45 days from the date of this hearing. If anyone is aggrieved by this decision, a further appeal can be made to the district court to determine its reasonableness within 30 days after the resolution is signed and filed with the zoning administrator.
Now would you like?
Go
a
for it.
motion?
Yeah, that'd be
I would
great.
make a motion to adjourn the zoning appeals and reconvene the Planning Commission.
Thank
I,
you, Marla.
Gary Israel, second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Please say aye if you
Aye.
approve.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes. Let's move on to item 5.3. Which is the Cornerstone Fifth. Wait for the iPad to get there. I guess I'll do it on paper. I now call upon agenda item 5.3, which is a public hearing on case Z-PUD24-0004. We'd like to welcome everyone interested in this case and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views you have as evidence so that an informed recommendation can be made by the Planning Commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold another public hearing on the matter, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You will be asked if there is any new information which has not been heard at this meeting. It's to everyone's advantage that you present all the necessary information at this hearing. After the city's zoning administrator provides the commission with background information, I will call upon the applicant. Public comments will be heard following the applicant. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The Planning Commission will close the hearing to public comments and then will consider the 14 factors on which to base their recommendation. During this time, the commission may direct questions to the applicant, the public, and/or city staff. You should be aware that the Planning Commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in a district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of the development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in the city and which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Here we go. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participation in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have any conflicts of interest.
None.
No.
None.
Official notice for this hearing was published on the City of Andover municipal website on August 24th, 2024, and notices were mailed to the applicant and real property owners of this record in the area of notification on August 23rd, 2024. The record shows at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there's evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I'll declare that the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I'll ask the commission if any of them have received any ex parte, verbal, or written communications prior to the hearing which they would like to share. Anybody receive anything? Okay. I'll now call on the city's zoning administrator, David Westfall, to provide us with a report on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The applicant here has submitted what's going to be an amendment to the general provisions for the easternmost lots on Block A, lots 1 through 10, that would ultimately allow for a 6-foot side yard setback to increase the development's density. Staff's concerns have largely been just balancing the benefits of this density with some of our concerns for health and safety. Additionally, the proposed general provisions would allow for projections to extend into this side yard setback. After conferring with the fire marshal and doing a fair amount of research in the code and fire code and residential code, we did find some important things to include in this case, and we've also included this in the recommendation per table R302.1 of the IRC. Both structures in this development would require a 1 hour rated wall to include projections between any of the two buildings. Additionally, while these projections can be permitted in a side yard setback, we also think it's important to clarify that they could be no closer to 4 feet of the adjacent building or projection. So just want to make sure we identify those.
Are the ones to the south and west there about 4 feet? I haven't been up to them. I've driven down the streets, but it must be close to 4 feet.
They're a little bit different configuration. They are 0 lot lines
Oh, yeah. Okay.
with a 6-foot minimum separation, which of course requires the 1 hour construction of the walls and the eave projections.
Any questions of staff?
Are these some of the smaller lots in Cornerstone?
You may recall this zoning case from quite some time ago, Gary. We did some changes to the zoning and platted this property a few years ago for duplexes. Since that time, the developer has come up with some different floor plans that are a much larger building. And she's trying to get the most density on those lots that she can get.
Okay.
Is there any suggestion what the difference is between how many units there would be if we approve this versus how many there would be if we do not?
The density count remains the same. They're just larger structures.
Any other questions? Staff? Are there any members of the public that'd like to speak? Are you the applicant? All right, you'll be up in a second. You can go ahead and make your way up there, though. Any written communication been received? No. Yep, go ahead. State your name and address if you would, applicant.
Name's Jay Cook with Boffman Company, agent on behalf of the applicant, 315 South Ellis in Wichita. Originally, we had sent in a request to modify, I guess, is it parcel 14? What was the slide before that? So I can kind of show what we were requesting. Yeah, it is parcel 14. So we requested all of parcel 14 to allow a 4-foot setback on the sides, the interior sides, and a 10-foot rear. We had a communication issue with staff on getting their input. Since then, we've talked with Les and David about not doing the entirety of parcel number 14, but only doing the eastern most 10-foot lots, which have the space to do 6-foot side setbacks. That would put 12 foot between each dwelling unit or each building. One of the things that I would like to mention that I believe is that we didn't really discuss is we'd still like to keep the reduction to the 10-foot rear setback, as it's against that reserve back there. I'm not sure if that's a part of the recommendation, and I hate to throw a wrench into that, but that is something we would still be requesting. Basically, what we're wanting to do is build nicer duplexes on these lots for an opportunity to have affordable housing in the area. The parcel to the east has done a little bit of zone changes to get a little bit more dense, and we're just trying to do the same thing. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer those.
Is that just lots 1 through 7?
It'll be the east lots, 1 through 10 are the lots that we're actually going to request tonight. And then we're going to work with staff on the remainder of those lots, which is about 16 or so more on the internal part of that parcel 14.
Thank you.
So Jay, these aren't zero plot line or?
These are not, no. Currently, I'm not really sure what the side setbacks were before we requested the change. What we figured out is when we were drafting up the building that they want to put on these, when we're putting it on the map, we're putting it into CAD, we're getting a little close on the sides. So we needed just a little bit of wiggle room for some because the lots aren't shaped in perfect square lines. So right now they probably have a standard R3 6-foot setback, I would imagine. Les, you might help me on that. I'm not 100. Yeah, so that was the reduction we were needing. We were shooting for 4 because that fit them all. We're obviously, if need be, we can amend that to 6 and just try to do a different floor plan, but still offer the same quality of build. But yeah, it was originally about 7-foot setbacks.
Any questions of the applicant? Anything final you'd like to say?
Hard to park out here this evening. That's all I'd like to say. I'm glad I left a little earlier from the house. But anyways, no, I want to thank staff for helping us kind of work this out. I know us engineering firms, we ask for a lot and they have to kind of cool us off a bit. So I do appreciate their efforts in helping us find a middle ground, and I believe we have, and we'll continue to work with them on the rest of the lots. But our client, she just wants to get started. She wants to break ground, and if it's just these East 10 lots, that's fine, just so she can get moving, because she's had this property for quite a while and tried to sell it, was asking too much for it, if I had to be honest with you. And now she wants to develop it. So if we could get these first 10, I'd appreciate it, and then we'll come back with staff help on the rest of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much
for coming.
So I have a question for staff. So Les, are we okay with the 6-foot setback?
Yes,
Okay, and okay with the 10-foot rear setback?
yes.
Okay,
I think what's important here, Gary, is that the front setback stays the same, so the appearance from the street won't change. It's just that this is a much larger house on the lot.
okay. And if we do just these 10, so the rest of parcel 14, which looked like it had,
That there's 61 total
okay,
permitted. You'll notice that these 10 are pretty regularly shaped rectangles. There are several others in the interior that are really oddly shaped.
Yeah.
That we're trying to find a fit that we in the fire marshal can live with on minimum setbacks and separations of buildings and so forth.
okay. So that'll have to be brought back before us, so when
Yes.
they've got everything worked out. Okay,
Okay.
So we're really just looking at these 10 lot,
Correct.
even though
They've-
there's,
They've
Red-
amended their application down
The
to
red
just
squares,
these 10
yeah.
lots.
thanks.
No written communications been received? No? Okay. No member to the public. Any other questions of staff? Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The planning commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation.
would you like me to read those? Or Dan, do you want to read those?
Go for it.
Oh, this, on the right page, 67.
It's page 7 of the attachment. At least in the city app, depending on how you're looking at it.
Staff items, number 1. Do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change in zoning were approved? Staff, public water, sewer, and streets are available adjacent to the subject property and can be readily extended. Number 2, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed rights-of-way, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff, the subject property is already platted. 3, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, because of the zoning districts of adjacent parcels, no landscape buffer would be required. 4, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff has received no opposing opinions from residents. 5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff, no error is known to exist. 6, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? The subject property is an undeveloped parcel in the Cornerstone PUD that is suitable for the current uses allowed by the PUD. This proposed amendment would be adjusting the minimum setbacks and density.
Concur.
7, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, no.
Concur.
8, how reasonably well suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the subject property would be well suited to the requested zoning change so long as the applicant can agree to the proposed requirements suggested in accordance with the IRC.
Concur.
9, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff, no.
Concur.
10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhoods? Staff, the subject property is surrounded on 3 sides by the Cornerstone mixed-use PUD, and the surrounding area has a mixture of uses from single-family residential to multifamily residential.
Concur.
11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff, the proposed use would not change the traffic or any other detrimental effects of the development. It is intended to increase the footprint a structure can occupy within the development.
Concur.
12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plans and policies? Staff, the proposed uses are generally in conformance with the comprehensive plan by providing alternative housing options at a higher density.
Concur.
Concur.
13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect the zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff, community development and AFR staff are supportive of the proposed amendment with the aforementioned modifications to the minimum distances between structures and the inclusion of building materials that meet IRC standards.
Concur. And staff, do you still want that 4-foot minimum in there in a motion?
Correct, Gary. The 4 feet would be the minimum separation between the projections, the overhangs.
Okay. And a 1 hour rated wall.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff does not anticipate any detrimental effects or hardship to public health or safety or welfare if there is a change to the subject property to the requested use. The staff opinion is qualified by comparing the existing permitted use to the proposed uses.
Concur.
Thank you. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I would remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it's based, and if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that are attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or to table the discussion? Gary, sounds like you had that under control.
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number Z-PUD 24-0004 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 6, 8, 10, and 12 recorded in the summary of this hearing, and the following conditions be attached to this recommendation. Those conditions are that the dwelling structures will be no closer than 4 feet to each other, and that there will be a 1-hour rated firewall per the IRC.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, second by Peter. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you, Dan. Sorry.
It's fine.
Oh, did you have a question?
I was just gonna, there would be the same amount of duplexes regardless. Okay,
Sorry about
That's
that.
all I had.
I didn't hear you or see you.
that's all I had.
Sorry about that. So let's just vote again. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Make a note, we have one dissenting and the rest vote for. Motion passes. Let's move on to item 5.4, which is a rezoning.
You need to do your closing.
Oh, yep, sorry about that. Getting ahead of myself here. Get back there now. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary for the hearing and consideration at their meeting of October 29th, 2024. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the commission's recommendation as such, may be received by the city clerk 14 days after tonight, October 1st, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. If there are any properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public street rights of way or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. All right. Now let's move on to 5.4, which is rezoning. Staff want to give some light on that?
Absolutely. So we received notification from the Butler County
This
Planning
was
Commission.
added, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, I apologize.
go ahead.
This was added this afternoon, right? Probably like 3:30. or
Yes,
4.
we're having some desync between the Planning Commission for the counties and ours. So we received notification today and apologize for the late addition. But yes, they announced a public hearing for this case on the 1st of October of this year. The intent to rezone per the applicant's request a property that is outside of our city limits, but within our extraterritorial jurisdiction. This would be rezoning it from the residential to the commercial district. So the applicant can later sell the land to a commercial developer. This action tonight would just be merely providing a recommendation, context, anything else the Planning Commission would like to add to be included in that hearing.
Any questions of staff?
Let's see, we don't. Okay, that's off of US 54 400 Kellogg, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's about 6/10 of a mile east of Prairie Creek Road on the south side of US 54 400. You can see from that aerial that it's surrounded on the east and across Highway 54 on the north by commercial activities. But the current use of the property is residential.
And what is the property to the east?
To the east is an auto repair. The last time I recall,
Okay,
And just to the east of that is an RV dealership.
okay.
This property is within our extraterritorial jurisdiction, but it's just outside of the future land use place type map.
And would this be affected by any of the new construction that will happen in the next 10, 20 years, whatever?
There are no projections for freeway improvements beyond Prairie Creek Road
Okay.
at this point.
So basically, they could put if they were putting a building, they could put it up almost to the property line or whatever setbacks are required.
When the county would consider that, they would have to take into effect any potential highway right-of-way that might be required.
Okay,
You can see the properties to the east are on a frontage road.
okay.
We haven't seen very many of these, have we? Over the last 2 or 3 years? Maybe a couple?
It's been about 20 years since this subject property was brought before the Planning Commission and City Council for annexation. At that time, the City Council declined annexation, which was a residential developer. If you kind of pan out from this particular site, there is a large platted subdivision of plus or minus quarter acre lots that were platted. If I remember right, it was in the 1960s, but there was no public water or public sewer, and the development just didn't come together.
So they are asking for a recommendation from us, at which then they will also approve at the county level?
The county will hold
Right.
the public hearings on the zoning and make their recommendation to the county commissioners.
Okay. Any more questions or concerns?
So what's our focus here? We're just saying that we don't believe that this is detrimental to the city of Andover in any way.
Sure, we don't think it's contrary to the distant future land use of the highway corridor.
So really, unless someone has any more questions, we just need a motion to recommend the approval of it.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend the approval of this rezoning request for 511 South Prairie Drive, Andover, Kansas, to the Butler County Planning Commission.
Thank you, Gary, for the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Dan. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Any member items?
Well, has everybody been to the park on 13th Street? Yeah, it's a wonderful park. Now, there has been this was brought up in one of our other meetings. There's been some discussion on the Facebook with Andover Chatter that, it's not perfect, and sorry about that, Les, that some child cut himself on a piece of tile and, everything's being worked out. Everything's addressed. If you hear anything from somebody, please have them reach out to the city about anything instead of just posting all their negative comments on Facebook.
Where was this piece of tile?
Well, it's around the water park.
Okay.
They didn't have all the tile up there and
Yeah, I'd be happy to clarify on that. And just to clarify also, the city was never notified that a child was cut. So just to clear the air on that. But the choice was made by administration to open the park early, even though we knew that the tile to finish the seating walls were not all in. And subsequently, because all the tile was not on the wall, there was some tile that fell off and that chipped, and it did not, the appearance of it did not look finished. And we were well aware of that. The project is not done, that there was an outstanding punch list, but in order to open in July and to give everyone a bit of an experience of the new wonderful splash pad that is there, the decision was made to open even though there were some items still outstanding. So that it became aware on a non-official city channel that on social media that there were some comments made about the tile and the appearance and the concern. And those were addressed on the city's official channels. So happy also to just in general let the public know that if there are any issues, to be sure and call City Hall. So thank you.
I think it was great that the city opened it
Yeah.
so that people had an opportunity to see what the splash pad was going to be like for the coming year. I mean, I ride out there and I believe they've now turned the water off, correct? To the splash pad, or is it still on for?
I believe it is closed. I believe September 15th, if my recall is accurate, was the closing of the splash pad.
But see, that's given kids the opportunity to be out there while the weather was good and enjoy it. And the anticipation of it for next year will just be that much higher. So yeah, things aren't going to be perfect. I mean, I don't know where people get this idea that everything has to be perfect. And, you know, it's a little ridiculous. I think it's a beautiful park.
Anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thanks, everybody.